We're going to spend the next hour thinking about what on earth magic and conjuring might have in common with design, and we're going to be thinking about the fact that the thing which they both have in common is this idea of skepticism, the importance and the value of seeing the world as it really is, as opposed to the world as it has been created for you. And I suppose the topic is dear to my heart because two of the things that I really enjoy in life are, number one, UX and design, which is why I'm here, but number two, magic as well. And I'm going to try and link those two things together. So I'm a part-time UX guy. I own and run an agency based in Belfast called Fathom. And when I'm not working, occasionally at weekends, occasionally after a couple of glasses of wine, I can be persuaded into showing off and doing a few magic tricks. Do please tweet me. You'll see my address at Dunlop71. One of the benefits of tweeting me is that at least it shows to the people back at the office that I'm doing a day's work and I'm not off in some kind of jolly. Although I did say this a couple of years ago, I asked someone to tweet me, and someone in the crowd who I had never met before tweeted this. So if you're going to tweet me, do please be kind. But I'm going to start the story, if I may. I'm going to set the story in a slightly historical context, because I got into magic as a kid. That was when I first kind of got interested in magic. And for those of you of a certain vintage, and I can see in the room there are some people possibly around my age and lots of people who are probably younger. But certainly in the late 70s and in the early 80s, the most popular magician in the UK was Paul Daniels. He had primetime television on a Saturday evening, and his show went out to millions and millions of people. So like lots of kids of that time, I sort of quite enjoyed his show. And when Christmas and birthdays came up, I persuaded my parents to buy me a Paul Daniels magic set. And it was in there that I learned some of the secrets of the world of magic. Just a practical note, the Paul Daniels magic set is not to be confused with the Stormy Daniels magic set, which is a very, very different thing altogether, I'm led to believe. But around the time that Paul Daniels was big, there was also a second magician guy who could do tricks, who was also kind of popular on the scene at that time. Now this is a more recent picture of him. Anybody know who it is? Uri Geller, exactly right. So Uri Geller was also popular and in the media around that time. Geller was a young Israeli magician, but Geller was different to lots of other magicians, because whilst lots of other magicians just were happy to say that this was just a little bit of trickery and a little bit of illusion and a little bit of conjuring, Geller claimed that he had actual, real-life psychic powers. So Paul Daniels was a member of the Magic Circle, a well-known organisation that did conjuring tricks. Geller wasn't. Geller said that he had been given this gift which allowed him to predict the future, to influence events that he wasn't part of, and of course his most famous trick, the one that he was best known for at the time, which was bending spoons. And it might seem a trivial thing to observe, but around that time, the world of magic was unhappy, wasn't pleased about the fact that everybody was just admitting, look, this is just a little bit of trickery, but Geller was claiming that this was some kind of magic power. And there was a kind of a division in the world of magic around that time. So let me show you a clip of Geller doing his thing on a chat show, just showing one of his tricks. And then I'll introduce another person into the conversation, and we can kind of explore it from there. So here is Geller on television in the late 1970s.
I know you're going to think this is a setup, friends, and old Tom has never conned you on anything. This guy is bending this key by rubbing it. It was bent at about a 1 degree angle when you started out, and it's coming up on 45 degrees now and still moving.
You're thinking bend, is that what you're doing?
Yes, I'm saying bend.
You're saying bend,
yes.
Hard, soft?
No, I'm saying bend, and sometimes I say bend, baby.
But Geller was best known for his way with spoons.
Hold the tip of the spoon very, very gently.
Okay.
What I'm doing is I'm trying to melt the metal down. Yes, you see, I feel it.
It's
yes,
going.
It's getting
I
loose.
feel it. Yeah.
And there's no force at all in my hands. Yes, look what's
like
happening.
this. There's no force at all.
Look, the whole, you see, it's becoming
the whole
like
thing's
plastic.
ready to fall off.
And touch it here where I'm stroking it. There is absolutely no.
That is eerie. have a wisdom tooth.
If you can see, the metal is beginning to crack here.
It's breaking.
Yeah, see
And
what's,
he's just
look,
doing
it's becoming, it's like
Look,
puddle
finish.
wax. You see? Look, and keep stroking
look
it
at
here. Look, you see the, no, don't, you see the crack is becoming bigger.
Yep.
I melt the metal down, so
How?
I want it to bend. I just say bend.
Yeah, you melted it.
You see?
So that was Geller doing his thing. And so this was a bit of a sensation. This took the magic world by storm. You can see exactly what he's doing. He can bend metal with his bare fingers, and he was claiming that he was able to do it through these psychic or supernatural powers. And as I mentioned, the magic fraternity wasn't happy with this, and there was one guy in particular who decided that he wanted to expose Uri Geller. And the guy who wanted to expose him is the guy that you see on the screen behind me, a guy called James Randi. And James Randi is one of my great heroes for reasons that I'm going to go on to explain. But what Randi wasn't happy about was that he felt that there wasn't too much distance between the guy who could bend spoons or bend keys and claim it was supernatural, and the guy who could claim that he could cure your cancer, or he could cure something that you had if you just sent him money. He felt that Geller was moving into the field of potential exploitation, potentially preying on the weak or the vulnerable, and Randi saw it as his job to expose Uri Geller. So he did a number of things. Randi was well known in the entertainment industry, so he put together videos explaining how this trick was done. So I'm going to show you a video which Randi put together explaining the trick, and then I'm going to explain what happened after that.
The media, even some scientists, were taking the Geller phenomena seriously. So I decided to show, for starters, that I could at least duplicate these effects using trickery. Now, a key can be displayed in such a way that it looks like it's bending. For example, just by stroking it, you'd swear that it's bending right up before your eyes. Magicians call this process ratcheting. But to do this, the key has to be bent in advance. The hard part, of course, is how to go about bending the key without letting them catch you. Now, there are several ways. I could, for example, take it and press the tip against the top of the table. That would do it. Or, in shifting my chair backwards or forwards, as I just did, I could have taken it and dropped it below the level of the table and pressed the tip on the chair I'm sitting on, which is exactly what I just did. Did I fool you?
So Randi went about exposing Geller, but his biggest expose came on the Johnny Carson show. So the Johnny Carson show at the time was the most popular late night show in America. It had the largest market share by some distance, and Johnny Carson and James Randi were old buddies from the entertainment circle. In fact, Johnny Carson, when he was a kind of up-and-coming comedian, he also did some magic tricks. So Carson and Randi knew each other. So when Johnny Carson booked Uri Geller to come on his show to do his tricks, Johnny Carson phoned his old mate, James Randi, and said, Uri Geller is coming on the show. Is there stuff we can do in the studio which means that if it is trickery, we will expose him? Are there ways that we can set things up so that if Geller is trying to fool us, then he's going to get caught out? And the answer is yes, there were. So Johnny Carson and James Randi went about setting up the studio in such a way that if Geller was anything other than genuinely psychic, his tricks were going to fail. And I'm going to show you a couple of minutes of 22 minutes of the most excruciating live broadcasting in American television history. There was 22 minutes of this stuff, but you'll be glad to hear I'm just going to show you the worst of it, the most excruciating of it. So I'll show you Geller coming on to the show, and I'll let you see how things start to go pretty badly, pretty quickly.
Would you welcome, please, Uri Geller?
Okay, so that's him in the show. So we'll just. Oh yes. So Geller comes on. I'll just.
Because before this program, your producer came and he read me at least 40 questions you're going to ask me.
Well, I can ask you all kinds of questions if you'd like me to ask you questions.
I have to have time. And
Garth, we are back. Uri was telling me you don't feel what, strong tonight?
I don't feel strong. It's not all tonight. Right now I'm feeling being pressed, and then I can't.
Well, I'm not trying to press you. I really not.
You're only telling me, well, will you try that or that?
Well, I thought that was the idea of. No, I'm not trying to put you down.
And so on. And those 22 interminable minutes are still all on YouTube if you feel the urge to go and watch 22 minutes of awkwardness. But it was live, it did go out, and it was exactly as you saw on the screen. Now, what was it with 1970s television presenters and smoking? Surely they can wait until the end. Anyway, so Uri Geller was exposed significantly on national television. And James Randi thought that was the end of the matter. Randy had done his thing, he had caught him out, he had set him up, he was exposed live on national television, and Randy felt sure, that's it, that's the end of it. We will never hear of Uri Geller again because he's been exposed as the fraud that he is. And to Randy's huge surprise, and where this starts to connect itself with the world, with the world of UX and with the world of design, is that the opposite happened. Randy thought it was the end of Geller, but Geller had done such a job in persuading people that he was actually supernatural that people said, oh, he was genuinely just feeling weak that night. Johnny Carson genuinely just put him under too much pressure. It was actually the studio lights that meant that he wasn't able to carry out the trick. But most concerning of all, and if any of you were in this room before lunch, you would have heard Rebecca speak about bias. Most concerningly of all, for me, the scariest piece of feedback which Randy got was, oh, you were able to recreate with conjuring the actual magic which Uri Geller has as a psychic. So even when the lies were exposed in front of them, the desire to believe the completeness of the showman's story was so powerful that people couldn't even begin to accept the actual logic which was presented specifically in front of them. And that, if you want convincing of the challenge of human bias, there it is right there in a nutshell and in a single story. And I suppose for me, all of this leads to a brilliant quote from Penn of Penn and Teller fame. And this is where the worlds of design and the worlds of conjuring begin to converge. Penn says this: when a magician lets you notice something on your own, his lie becomes impenetrable. And that is exactly, I feel, why UX is a discipline. Because when someone offers us a design, very often our first response is to have an emotional response to how we think it looks or if we personally like it. And once that response has been reached, or once we have decided on what we think of that design, changing our mind is almost impenetrable. And just as Uri Geller gets exposed through data and science and skepticism, so also design gets improved via exactly the same tools and techniques. Through data, through insight, through skeptical inquiry. Those are the things which expose magicians, fake magicians, and those are the things which help us make design better. And I suppose what this starts to get at is this really intriguing human dynamic. Can I ask you just to shout out adjectives that describe how you feel when you're wrong? What sort of emotions do you have when you're wrong? Shame, embarrassment, annoyed, anything else? Disappointed, yeah. So we associate being wrong with very negative emotions. But what skepticism argues is that there's an important nuance to the question. Skeptics argue that feeling wrong feels brilliant. It's finding out that you're wrong that stings. So for instance, let's just imagine, take the 40 or 50 people who are in the room right now. If I was to ask you all, does God exist? If I was to ask you, should we be on the right of the political spectrum or the left of the political spectrum? If I was to ask you your view on the current President of America, the upcoming President of the UK, there's every chance we would have a range of views in the room. But what do we all have in common? Even though our views are different, what we all have in common is the belief that we are correct. So, by pure logic, many of us, possibly all of us, are sitting here right now very content, very happy, proud almost, to be holding views that are incorrect because they are contradictory to someone else who is equally as happy holding their views. And of course, they cannot both be correct at the same time. So what skepticism is about, and the reason that Randy has made it his life's mission to expose frauds, what it's about is recognizing that feeling wrong, having incorrect emotions, counterintuitively, it feels great. And our jobs are to take down the barriers that stops people from changing their minds, because it's the recognition that we are wrong is the piece which we find so difficult to manage. So that's a little bit of background about how the world of magic and the world of UX kind of tie together. And what I'm going to do just for the rest of our time is I'm going to try and show you a few tricks, lots of collaborative tricks that we'll hopefully do together. And I'm going to tie those into biases to begin to illustrate the biases that the tricks perhaps expose and have a look at how that impacts on design. So that's what I'm going to do. So the first trick that I'm going to do, I am going to lean on an old buddy of mine, a guy called Dynamo. Now to lean on Dynamo, and I hope the technology is on my side here, I just need to switch into my QuickTime player, which brings up my camera, which I'm thinking will allow me to open up my cards to show you my deck of cards. So, if you can all see there, I'm hoping you can all see. It's just a regular pack of cards. You'll just see it all here. All the various cards. You can see them there. And what I need to do is I need to ask for a volunteer. Someone be kind enough to come up. Come on ahead. I met you at UX Glasgow. What's that?
You taught me.
Oh, did I? Okay. What's your name?
Jenny.
Jenny, how are you?
I'm good.
Okay, so Jenny, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to say stop when you see a card that you would like, okay? Okay. Oh, no, just say stop. I mean, obviously they're all random, so just
stop.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over,
Yep.
and I'm going to do the same, okay? And what I'm going to ask you to do is again just say stop when you feel you'd like to say stop.
Stop.
Okay. So I'm going to turn those over, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work through the pack until we get the first upturned card, and I'm going to give it to Jenny, okay? So we have our first upturned card here, and I'm going to ask you to take it and just have a look at it. Just don't let anyone see it, just have a look at it yourself, okay? And we're going to go back to Dynamo, and we're going to hear what Dynamo has to say for himself, okay? So hopefully the technology is on my side.
Hey, how you doing? So my friend here has just had you choose a card, right? And you're the only person here who knows what it is. Great, keep thinking about that card and take your right hand and hold it over the screen. You doing that? Great. On the count of 3, lift your hand up. 1, 2, 3. Your card, the 2 of clubs.
Jenny, would you show everyone your card, please? Round of applause for Jenny, thank you. Thank you, Jenny. So, normally I do that trick after a few glasses of wine. It's much more terrifying in this kind of setting, but happily it worked, and thanks to Jenny. So what is this about, or why did I start with that? The truth is that when I was doing the trick, I made sure that the cards that I was offering Jenny were such that the most available card was the one that I wanted her to select. And at the heart of all design challenges, and for me, the reason that I believe that UX even exists as a discipline is because of the most overwhelmingly challenging bias that we all face, which is the availability heuristic. And the availability heuristic simply means that we overvalue information which is immediately available to us. The danger of the availability heuristic is that it allows us to build up an incorrect view of the world which says that everybody's world is just like our world. And of course it's not. Our users are remarkably unlike us in many, many, many ways. I always get this idea that if we work as design professionals, that we live by default in design ivory towers. It's not our fault, but we probably have better hardware than our users have. We probably have faster broadband. we probably spend more time using digital products than the users that we are designing for. We probably have a better understanding of design and a more nuanced ability to work out technology than those that we are designing for. And as if that wasn't difficult enough or challenging enough, it is multiplied by the fact that we spend our working days with people just like us. So the people that our colleagues, our clients, whatever IT or UX team that you work in, your colleagues are probably in the same boat. So if we don't break out of the availability heuristic, by default, we're going to just design something not for our users, but something for our mates or for our friends. I talked a little bit about Randy challenging Uri Geller using data and logic and insight and facts. And I'm going to do the same when it comes to the availability heuristic by sharing with you the results of the largest usability study ever taken in humankind. And I'm sure you may have heard of it. It was undertaken by the OECD, the network of the world's developed countries. Because what they wanted to find out was this. They wanted to ask across the 33 OECD countries, what is the degree to which they can assume adult IT literacy? And to answer that question, they tested nearly 216,000 users to ask them to do things on technology. So there were 14 tasks that users were given, each task a little bit more difficult than the one before, and a user would be taken up until the first task that they failed at, and from there they would be graded 1, 2, 3, 4, levels 1, 2, 3, 4 to reflect their degree of computer literacy. So what were the results? So the results were that 14% of those tested were only just computer literate. They could barely use technology. About 29% of people were at level 2, 26% of people were at level 3, and on level 4 there were only 5%. Now, why does this matter? This matters because everyone in this room is in the 5%. All of my colleagues are in the 5%. Most of our customers and clients are in the 5%. We live in a world where we are surrounded by 5%ers. And I just feel that as UX practitioners, we owe it to those that we design for to constantly fight and break out of that little digital 5% ivory tower. The mathematicians amongst you will have observed that those numbers don't add up to 100. And the reason that they don't is because 26% of those who were tested aren't even IT literate at all. And so when you think about some of the major UX projects that we can all stand back and really admire, the likes of gov.uk, for instance, which has managed to get significant numbers of UK public sector transactions happening online and happening digitally, they have fought like crazy to get out of their digital ivory towers. They've fought to get away from millennials who will maybe default to their mobile phones first. They've fought like fury to get down to their hard-to-reach groups. And just to really hammer it home, you are here. One of my favourite quotes from the guys at GDS comes from one of their former directors, a guy called Russell Davies. He had this lovely quote about his users. Someone said to him, you do a great job looking after your users. You really put them at the centre of your design processes. I'm sure your users are really thrilled at what you're doing for them. And he responded with this: hopefully most of our users don't think about us or notice us. They just use the service and get on with their lives. And it's Davies' ability to really actually empathetically understand how his users feel and what they need from him. It's that kind of mindset that was at the heart of some of the brilliant things which GDS have been able to do over the past decade or so. So that's a little bit around the availability heuristic. So maybe time for another quick trick. What I'm going to ask everyone to do, please, is just to select, don't have to tell anybody, but just internally, just select one of the items on the screen behind me, please. So precious metal or wool or a sharp cat's toy, whatever, okay? Everyone got one? All right. I'd like you just to note the number to its left. Just in your mind, observe, is the number odd or is the number even? Okay? So just odd or even. So I need you to remember the item and if the number beside it is odd or even. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a second screen, And on this second screen, I would like you to identify the item on the second screen which is most closely aligned to the choice that you made on the first screen. So have a look down through the items with the descriptors, and if there's one which feels that you can connect it with your first choice, then I want you to select it. Okay? So everybody got one? Okay, everyone's got one. All right. So could I ask you please to put up your hand if you selected an odd item in the first screen? Okay, so odd items. Okay, and I want you to think now about the item on this screen which is closest. Because what I'm getting is, I'm getting a lot of carving knives. Am I getting a lot of carving knives? Yeah, lots of carving knives in the odds. I thought, yeah, that there's lots of... and in case the evens are feeling just too smug, I'm also getting a lot of yellow balls of yarn. So I think I got the odds and the evens. What's this about? Well, this is about the bandwagon effect, which is another well-known bias. And the bandwagon effect is that because our brains are wired in such a social way, you know, 250,000 years of evolution has taken us to the stage where we recognize that human survival is wrapped up in social survival, and therefore we are hugely swayed by those around us. And that can be good. It helps us survive as a species. But when it comes to design, it can stop us making the right call because everybody else is going this way, but the data is taking you in a different direction. And we've got to have the nerve and the courage to run with the data. Those of you who have watched the movie, The Big Short, will know that the whole movie is based on this very bias, the bandwagon bias. It's the story, I won't spoil the movie for you, but the story revolves around an almost autistic type mathematician who has this wonderful, brilliant analytical mind, and his understanding of what the numbers are saying in the mid-noughties is that a lot of Western economies are heading for a crash. But the narrative in the news at the time was that economies were going to continue to go forever, and that housing was solid, and that lending was solid. And of course, he was exactly correct. His prediction was true. It was someone whose understanding and commitment to the numbers was so strong that he was able to resist the bandwagon effect. Related to that, I have another question. If you have a look across Europe at all the countries' rates of organ donation, what is the single biggest factor which distinguishes countries with low rates of organ donation and countries that have high rates of organ donation? Anybody? Oh, everyone's shy. Okay, I'll give you the answer. I thought it might be the hand. So the answer is opt in or opt out. So countries where you, by default, when you were born, you give your organs away, those countries have really high rates. And countries where your default opted out, when you're born and you have to opt in, well, those countries have really low rates. And what I find interesting about that stat is, even if you look at countries which are socially and politically very similar, like the Scandinavian countries, what we see is that even in Scandinavian countries, the opt-in countries have low rates and the opt-out countries have really high rates. In other words, this default position, that how we set the default for bandwagoning, is a really big driver of human behaviour. It's even more a stronger driver even than politics or culture or society. The default set at birth is the biggest driver of organ donation right across Europe. And as UX designers, we can really use that bandwagon effect and the power of the default to our strong advantage when we are designing interfaces. A very strong driver of user behavior on an interface is to communicate to that user what most other users do when they are on that screen. Users appreciate the ability to understand where the value of the interface lies. Let me give you a couple of examples. A friend of mine was in Malawi last year with Habitat for Humanity. He asked me if I would sponsor him a few pounds, which I was happy to do. And what you can see is when I go on there's a little bit about how much he's raised and how much he wants to raise. But look at this, the default is clearly communicated to me. If I'm not sure how much I want to give Paddy, it's saying to me £25 is what most people give. It's steering me towards the default action. Similarly with these guys here, the American charity Water, they're making it pretty clear that the average donation on their system is $35. So if I'm unsure what to give, They're helping me do that. But perhaps the best known example of the power of the default comes from our friends at Amazon. And it comes from about 15 years ago when Amazon made some design changes on their flow, which they called in hindsight the $300 million button. And you may well have heard of the button of that value. And what they argued was they renamed the button from specific to generic. They renamed it towards the default. They renamed it towards the bandwagon. This button used to be called Sign In. And as you'll know, when you're carrying out an e-commerce transaction and you've filled up your basket and you want to check out, if you're a first-time user, the last thing you want to think about is bothering to sign in. You just want to order the jeans or the shoes or whatever it is that you want to buy. And what Amazon did was they reoriented the language around their flow so that the language was giving the user the impression that they were just flowing through. You don't have to sign in. We are continuing through the process, making life easier for the user. Now, the critical part of this story is that the functionality of what the user was doing didn't change. The user was still signing in, but that wasn't important to the user. They just wanted to flow through. And this was particularly helpful for the new customer who didn't want to think about registering or guest checkout or signing in. They didn't want to think about that until they knew the product was on its way and they had the order confirmation screen. So Amazon, by moving their language from specific to default, moving it towards the bandwagon, helped a greater number of customers get further in their e-commerce flow than they had before. Final example of the power of the default. As you can possibly hear from my accent, I am from Belfast. And Belfast is in Northern Ireland, of course. And one of the benefits of being in Northern Ireland is that due to our unique historical and cultural and political legacy, how's that? Am I on the... Did okay? I have both an Irish passport and a British passport, which is, which is great. It gives me good flexibility. And so do my family. And by coincidence, both of my passports are due for renewal in the same month. So they're both 10-year passports, but they both fell due for renewal last summer. And whilst my family has always had British passports all of our lives, we also wanted to when I was renewing my Irish passport, we also wanted to get my wife and kids sorted also for an Irish passport. So one Saturday morning, I was sitting in the kitchen, I was drinking my coffee, and I thought, I'm going to renew my British passport, I'm going to renew my Irish passport, and I'm going to get new passports for my wife and 2 kids. So that was my task in UX speak. So I found myself comparing both interfaces just by fluke, if you like, because I had a number of different jobs to do. So can I ask this question? On the UK passport page, how do I begin the process of getting a passport? Yeah, start now. On the Irish page, how do I begin the process of getting a passport? It's impossible, isn't it? Now, as it turns out, the answer is, I click this link here, renew your passport book and or passport card and or apply for your person, blah, blah, blah. That's what I do. And the reason that I show that slide is because I want to assure you that when we talk about representing or illustrating the default for users, we're not trying to somehow trick them into doing something that they don't already want to do. We are communicating to the user where the value in the interface most lies. And so it's really confusing. But I also had a secondary task. So I knew from experience that I could renew my British passport. I knew from experience that I could renew my Irish passport. But what I didn't know was, could I get a passport for the first time for my wife and our 2 kids? So I didn't know the answer to that question. So that was my secondary task. What can I do behind the button? And again, have a look at how wonderfully clear the copywriting on gov.uk is. Look at this. You can apply for, renew, replace, or update your passport and pay for it online. Total and absolute clarity about what awaits me behind the button. Anybody want to have a wild guess where I found the same information on the Irish passport site? You've guessed it, our old friend, the FAQ's dumping ground. In Ireland, we like to make sure that if someone's going to get a passport, they got to really want that passport. They got to really work for that passport. You want to be an Irish citizen? Oh, you're going to earn your crust. So the bandwagon effect and the power of the default has a big impact in terms of how we understand our role as interface designers, because when we work hard to communicate to the user the value of the interface, what most other people do, typically it makes flows easier and gives users greater amounts of comfort and confidence. Okay, so next up we're going to have a look at the hindsight bias. And to illustrate the hindsight bias, we're going to do another quick experiment, if we may, please, okay? So could I ask the men in the room to close your eyes, please? Because I'm going to show something to the ladies, and then we're going to swap it round, okay? So if the men in the room would close your eyes, please. What you'll see, ladies, is 9 numbers, and around those 9 numbers, there is a shape. You can see that each number is associated with a shape, okay? So I'm going to give you maybe 5 or couple more seconds just to embed in your mind the numbers and the shapes. Okay? So, ladies, could I ask you to close your eyes, please? So everyone's eyes should be closed. I'm then going to bring on my next screen, and I'm going to ask the men, please, to open your eyes. So, men, if you would open your eyes, please, and have a look. Again, you can see the numbers and the shapes, and I'll just give you a few seconds to get your head around those. Okay? So that's off the screen. So everyone open their eyes again, please. And what I'm going to ask you is this. Can you, in your mind, draw in shapes the number 1974? If you've got a pen and paper, please get it out and see if you can sketch it and write it down. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, I'll give you 5 more seconds, and then I'm going to show you the answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so here's the answer. And can I ask you to put your hand up, please, if you got it right? Okay, so lots. Oh, very good. That's nice. I can see visual. Oh, lots of visual proof. Well done. Now I observe that. Did any gentleman get it right? 1. Okay, so okay, 2. So all right. So it does seem that we've got a split in terms of who got it right and who got it wrong. And where I'm going with this is I'm going to reveal to you what I showed each grouping. I've gone the wrong way, have I? To the woman in the group, I showed this, and to the men in the group, I showed this, which isn't really fair. But what am I doing? I'm illustrating the importance of patterns in how we make decisions. So identifying patterns has been a really important shortcut that the brain has had for millennia. It's good for us not to have to do the heavy processing of making every single decision from scratch. And because we don't want to make every decision from scratch, we make little shortcuts in our brain, little patterns by which we get from loose insight to decision more quickly than we probably should. And sometimes that's beneficial to us, but when it comes to design, it's not necessarily beneficial, because what it can mean is that we attribute patterns where they don't already exist. We simplify history. We observe things which have happened, and we think that they are more predictable than they actually are. Historians, and you'll be glad to hear I won't say too much on this, but historians have written on this extensively. This idea that we often have a temptation to write history as if the outcomes which happened were almost inevitable. And that yes, this happened, and yes, this king succeeded that one, and yes, that war was fought, and those countries came together, and those countries separated. When you dig into actual historical events, they are much, much less predictable. They are far more random. There is far more luck and chance involved in the history of humankind than sometimes our history books can make us believe. And so it's exactly the same in the world of design. It is very tempting to look at successful digital products and to apply patterns to their success which don't actually exist. So very often when we're thinking about how can we build or design successful digital product, we rightly look to eBay and Facebook and Amazon and Skyscanner and gov.uk. We look at all these fabulous examples of great design. But what we forget is the 10 or 20 or 50, the handful of digital brands which dominate our digital world, evolved from a market landscape of tens of thousands of social and travel and search and performance marketing products, all of whom were trying to make it. And what the warning of patternicity, or the warning of the hindsight bias, which simplifies history, the warning of those are that we need to be very careful not to establish patterns where patterns don't exist. And we have to be very careful in particular not to simplify the founder's story, or not to simplify how these organizations have found the fabulous success they have. Those of you who have read this book, as I have, will know that it's a fabulous way to rally against the hindsight bias. It's a great way of making sure that we can cope with the randomness and the risk and the luck and the unknowns, all of which influence product design and direction, all of which influence our likelihood of success. They keep us grounded in a way that we can do product design in the real world, messy as it is and unpredictable as it is and full of risk as it is, and it helps us break out of some of those patterns which we can be tempted to do. Okay, next bias. So the next bias is the cocktail party effect, and the cocktail party effect is our ability to respond to and prioritize stimuli which we find more interesting or which confirms what we already believe. It's also called confirmation bias. Let me give you an example of confirmation bias, which is all around wanting to create the world that we want to exist. Here's a great example of confirmation bias from 2013. So I'm a big rugby fan. It's a sport that I really enjoy. And whilst Ireland have beaten the All Blacks a couple of times over the last number of years, in 2013 we had never beaten them. In the 100 years that we had played against them, we had never beaten the All Blacks. But in November 2013, with 80 minutes gone on the clock, and a rugby match has 80 minutes on it, with 80 minutes gone on the clock, Ireland had 22 points and New Zealand had 17. And the match was on a Sunday, and Ireland was full of people trying to work out how they could get the Monday off work, because we were going to go and celebrate. That's what confirmation bias says. But when we rally against confirmation bias, what we see, heartbreakingly, is that the full picture is somewhat more shocking. The full picture shows us the All Black substitute Ryan Crotty going in the corner in injury time to bring the scores level to 22 all. The try was converted and the All Blacks won 27-22. Now the story isn't as painful as it used to be, because we beat the All Blacks the last two times we played them, but it hurt for a long, long time. What confirmation bias is about breaking out of the things which we know, breaking out of only keeping to hand the information which we have, and breaking out and beyond that. General Melchett has a lovely attitude to confirmation bias. If nothing else works, total pig-headed unwillingness to look facts square in the face perhaps might. Let me show you a lovely example of an organisation which really pushed the boundaries when it came to confirmation bias. We do a lot of work in the banking sector as a UX agency. I suppose banking is one of those sectors that can really benefit from looking after their customers better through digital devices, and so it's no surprise that we tend to do quite a bit of work in that area. And one of the things, if you work in a bank, or if you've been involved in UX and in financial services previously, one of the things that you will know is that one of the first challenges that the agency faces, who is running a program of UX, is that in a bank, if you speak to the head of credit cards, they will convince you that if it wasn't for credit cards, the bank would be on its knees. And you speak to the head of mortgages, and they also convince you that if it wasn't for mortgages, the bank would be on its knees. And you speak to the head of personal banking, or the head of lending, or the head of whatever, and they all, quite rightly, are very proud of their product and their product range, and so they want to champion it. And as you may know, for far too long, the unholy compromise which was made as a result of this was that they just fought for space on the homepage. And if there wasn't enough space on the homepage, then, God forgive us, we got a car selling, and that ticked all the internal boxes to get the site live. But increasingly over the last number of years, there have been banks who have had the courage of their convictions to get beyond that view, to get beyond that confirming view of the world they want to create for the bank, and to add into the discussion what it is that users want to do when they're on the site. And whilst we weren't involved in the project, we have admired from afar the work of a bank called Sparbanken, which is a Norwegian bank. So what they decided to do was that they would dominate their homepage not by internal products, but by, guess what, stuff users wanted to do. Who'd have thought that was going to work? And so they identified the users' top tasks, the things that they wanted to do on the site. And at first, the product owners in the bank weren't happy. They didn't like the fact that you couldn't see the mortgages or the lending or the personal accounts on the site, because the site was there to do what it was that users wanted to do. At least they weren't happy initially until the first number of months of analytics come in, and they recognized that in the mortgages product, the amount of people using the loan calculator was up 236%. They weren't happy until they had a look at the product display and they saw that 520 more visits were coming to the bank's products than they had been in the old site. And what this really encourages us to do is to buy into this almost counterintuitive idea that if you commit yourself completely to giving the user the thing which they want first, you have earned the right at that stage to then signpost them to the thing which it is that perhaps you would like to interest them in. Okay, last couple. Recency bias. I think I'll maybe just have a quick trick here, if we may. I wonder, could I ask for 3 volunteers, please, just to... Brilliant. Okay, you please, and the 2 chaps here, please, would you come on up? Okay. Okay, thank you, folks. So, can I ask your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Hanan.
Hanan? Yeah. Daniel? Evelyn. You're very welcome. Thank you for coming up. So, just want to show you the cards as we saw. Hopefully you can see those. I'll just show them to the guys as well. What I would like to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to pick a card. Okay. So, as before, I'll just flick and I'll ask you to say stop when you're ready.
Okay, stop.
Okay. If you would just take that one, please. All right. Let's set these here. And I'm going to, in a moment, yeah. I'm going to ask you to do the same.
Stop.
Okay. That one there. Okay. That leaves a very small pile here, but we're going to try it. Okay. Okay. All right. So I'll give you that one. Okay. All right. So what I would like to see then, please. So Hanan, would you be the first to look at your card and show everybody? Okay. So you get the 10 of hearts. And what's your card, please? Also the 10 of hearts, okay, and your card? 3 10 of hearts. Brilliant. Round of applause for our 3. Thank you very much. Thank you. Cheers. Okay. So what's all that about? Well, I'm going to try to shoehorn in recency bias into this one. So because Hanan picked the 10 of hearts, I think then maybe Daniel felt that he was going to be, he had to do the same, and then Evelyn was the same. She maybe thought she would do that too. But recency bias again is one which really dogs decision making. Recency bias is the reason that Warren Buffett is the world's most successful investor, because he has been brilliant for 50 years at resisting the recency bias. He recognizes that stocks and shares are the opposite of the weather. With weather, you kind of know what it's going to do in an hour's time. You have an idea what it will do tomorrow. You have no real idea about next week, and you're guessing when it comes to a month. What Buffett knows is that stock systems are more predictable the further into the future that you go, and he's been playing that game for 50 years. And I think that rallying against recency bias is something that we as designers would do well to embrace. Do any of these feel familiar to you in terms of trends which continue to challenge good design, whether it's out of control car sales, overuse or misuse of the hamburger menu, video backgrounds, parallax hell, aggressive pop-ups, we continue to get pressured to build these things into our interfaces, even though that we know that either they need to be designed and implemented with exceptional levels of nuance, or they have to be removed altogether. Those are our challenges. Okay, final trick and final bias, folks. This is a trick that I'm sure you have seen done online. It's one of those tricks that works by itself. I shouldn't really admit that, I'm sure, but it does. So I'm going to ask you all, please, just to select a card, whichever card you want, any of the 5 cards that are there. I'm going to remove the cards off the screen. That's them off the screen. And I'm going to bring them back onto the screen. And I'm hoping what you see when I bring them onto the screen is that yours has been miraculously removed. At least I hope it has. And this takes me to my final bias, and that is the survivor bias. And what the survivor bias is this tendency only to look at a subset of the data by not thinking about the problem in a wide enough context. In other words, in that trick that I've just done, the reason that trick works is because everyone just focuses in on the card that they have picked. So there's lots of other things happening with lots of other cards, but typically the person doesn't notice that because they are focused in only on what is immediately getting their attention. The most famous example of survivor bias comes from the Second World War. And in the Second World War, planes would go and they would do their raids in Europe, and they would return to Britain. And the plane engineers wanted to know, where should we strengthen the planes in order to increase their likelihood of making it back. And what they did was they put a schematic in place of all the places where the planes were hit, and they sat down because they began the process of strengthening the plane in the areas where it was hit. However, that is showing survivor bias, because where should the plane be reinforced? The plane should be reinforced where it wasn't hit. Why? Because the planes that were hit and made it back, they made it back. They were the survivors. The planes that need strengthening were the ones that never made it back. They were the ones that were hit somewhere else. So what a guy called Abraham Walt, who was a statistician, what he said was, we are using an incomplete data set. We are only looking at the planes which have made it back. We need to add to that the planes that didn't. And that had a radically different outcome on how that engineering process went. Final example of the survivor bias in action. Last year we did some work with a company called Ball.com. You may or may not have heard of them. They are effectively Amazon in Benelux. So in Belgium and Netherlands and Luxembourg, they've been able to keep market share, and they do what Amazon does in many other countries. It's an e-commerce website, and it's an e-commerce platform. And if any of you are involved in e-commerce, you will know that world relies massively on 2 important things. Number 1, really, really detailed product spreadsheets with everything to do with the product. And number 2, really, really well-structured product image files to aid with uploading. Because in that world, if you're an e-commerce manager for, let's say, a sports brand, and you want to sell through Ball.com, what you want to do is upload all your products and all your images in one go, and they'll be in the site. You certainly don't want to have to do that manually. So Ball.com, through their store admin panel, had 2 ways that you could upload your products onto their system. The first way was uploading one product at a time, all the product details and the product image, and then going on to the next product, and the next product, and the next product. And they knew that their store owners were having real difficulty with this, because when you looked at the call logs and you looked at the email support logs, what you could see was significant numbers of store owners were phoning into support asking difficult questions to do with the challenges that they were having with the single image upload and the single product upload. But Ball.com were really pleased to know that very few people phoned with difficulties to do with the multi-image upload and the multi-product upload. So they were thinking to themselves, this is great. At least we've got one of them right. We need to go about fixing the single image uploader. So they went on a program of going to visit their store owners of different sizes. And they physically traveled around the country, visiting their customers on their home turf, if you like, meeting their people and seeing them use their system in their natural environment. And whilst they didn't verbalize it, in the back of their heads they were thinking, what we will do is, we will learn the difficulties that people are having with the single image uploader. We'll make sure we understand all the user pain, but we will use the design patterns that we have used for the multi-image uploader when we're doing our solution, because we're not having any difficulties with the multi-image uploader. So you can imagine their surprise when they went to their first retailer and they observed the difficulties that they were having, and they said to their image retailer, why don't you just use the multi-image uploader? And what they said was, oh, it's so difficult, we've never even tried it. And all of a sudden it dawned on them that perhaps the reason that they didn't get any phone calls or any emails was because no one was using it. And they went to another retailer and another retailer and another retailer, and time again they got the same story. We were having enough difficulties with the single image upload, we didn't even want to risk using the multi-image upload. And what survivor bias could have done, if they hadn't physically gone and met their customers, what survivor bias could have done would have given them the perfectly wrong understanding of what was going on in the lives of users. And what the survivor bias encourages us to do and to say is to always pursue the complete data set, because it is so easy to, by coincidence or just by being unthinking, to be making design decisions on an incomplete data set. So folks, thanks for bearing with me and watching my tricks and listening to my theory. Just to sum up, the availability bias reminds us that our world is not our users' world, so we need to get out of the building. The bandwagon bias tells us that users are interested in what others do, so let users know where most people get value from your interface. The hindsight bias means we view past events as more predictable than they actually were, so test. Confirmation bias, we listen better to things which confirm our views, so bow down to insight. Recency bias, so shiny new things can be evil, follow principles not trends. And finally, survivor bias, only a subset of data is probably more dangerous than no data, so seek context relentlessly. Let me finish with wise words from a wise man, Mark Twain. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Thank you very much.